I've always heard it thrown around in the rabbit community that all rabbit hides, excuse me. So I've heard it thrown around that rabbit hides should have at least 2 entrances/exits, but I've never really heard anyone define it why. When I made my videos on covered litter boxes and kind of expressing why I'm not the biggest fan of them for a variety of reasons, including the fact that they offer poor ventilation, a lack of enrichment, one of the reasons I mentioned is the fact that they only had 1 entrance, and I had a lot of clapback from people disagreeing and telling me that their rabbits actually prefer hides with 1 entrance. In today's video, I want to analyze that claim a little bit deeper and decide whether rabbit hides actually need to have 2 entrances/exits. So do rabbit hides actually need 2 or more entrances? In the most basic form and literal interpretation of the question, no. Rabbit hides with 1 entrance are completely functional, and it's been proven time and time again that rabbits will use them and even enjoy them. However, I think it's important that, like all issues, we explore this in a deeper sense. Just because something is functional and usable doesn't mean that it's the best for our rabbits. For example, a lot of breeders for many years have had success on rabbits feeding 100% pellet diet with no hay or no greens, and their rabbits actually have lived a pretty long life and they were healthy enough to reproduce. However, we as pet owners realize that that's not the most ideal way to take care of a rabbit. I think that's what it comes down to. In my opinion, hides without 2 or more entrances are definitely not ideal for your rabbit, but of course there are exceptions. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the species of rabbits as a whole and making quite a few generalizations. Of course, all animals are individuals, and it's important to realize that rabbits have such a variety in personalities. What I'm saying might not apply to your rabbit, but we're kind of looking at this from a bigger issue, and you can see how this applies to you personally. When I made my video on covered litter boxes and talking about how rabbit hides really should have 2 or more entrances, one of the most common arguments I got was that wild rabbits will commonly use entrances and hides with only 1 entrance. I think it's a little bit funny because we don't really have wild rabbits. This is a rabbit, and of course there's rabbits in the wild, but he's domesticated, which means that he's genetically different than any rabbit you would find in the wild. Our rabbits are actually descendants of the European rabbit, but through domestication, they've actually been changed, and you can't just put one of our pet rabbits out in the wild and expect them to survive. In saying that, even though we don't have any wild rabbits, we can actually look at their great ancestors, the European rabbits, and there's a lot of behaviors that are still in common. European rabbits actually dig very complex burrow systems. I think a lot of people assume that they'd be like a dog or a wolf in that they'd have kind of a den area, which is their main hideout. But if you actually look at a rabbit's warren, it's extremely complex and it's almost like this giant maze. So why do they build these super complex burrows? For us as predator species and the fact that we mainly keep other predator species, this idea seems a little bit foreign to us. For example, dogs feel most secured in a crate because crates tend to have 1 entrance. Even snake hides, for example, usually have 1 very small entrance. This is because dogs and snakes are both predator species. For dogs, snakes, wolves, bears, any predator you can think of, they feel less safe sleeping somewhere where there's a bunch of different entrances because that's just more opportunity for a predator species to come and kill them. However, rabbits are a prey species. That's why they don't sleep for long periods of time. Everything a rabbit does is very sporadic. In fact, they actually have 3 eyelids, so when they sleep, they don't even have to close their eyes. And rabbits aren't sleeping for long periods of time the same way dogs, wolves, and snakes are. A rabbit's first instinct is not to go somewhere where there's only 1 entrance, because if there's only 1 entrance, there's only 1 exit. In the case that a rabbit is confronted with a predator, like a snake, it would rather run away rather than have to fight back. When it has multiple entrances/exit, it means that if one finds one of the entrances, it still has 1,000 different ways to get out. Again, this idea feels weird because as humans, we're a predator species and we love places like our bedroom where there's only 1 entrance. And a lot of us can even feel anxious in rooms where there's a ton of different doors because people can approach you at all sides. But it's important to remember that rabbits are their own species, and especially as a predator species, they have very different needs than most other common pets. But if rabbits use hides with only 1 entrance, then it should be fine, right? The way I look at it, you never want to go against an animal's natural instincts. For example, a lot of people keep sugar gliders, and sugar gliders are nocturnal. A lot of people like to have them be awake during the day so that they fit their sleep schedule better, but that's extremely selfish. There's so many scientific things that we don't understand in an animal's natural biology. I think it's terrible to make an animal go against their instincts. In the simplest sense, forcing a rabbit to use a hide with only one entrance/exit does force them to go against their instincts. It might be very minor and it might not be a huge deal, but I just don't think it's worth making your rabbit do something that is probably not their preference. However, there's actually a lot of other reasons not to use these besides just their natural instincts. For one, if you have a pair or more of rabbits, these hides can actually be extremely dangerous. If your rabbits are both in a hide and they get into a little fight, even if it's something super minor, if neither of the rabbits can escape, that's so dangerous. Sometimes it's not even an intentional fight, it's just that one rabbit is blocking the entrance and the other rabbit can't get out. I think that's one of the reasons I hate covered litter boxes being pushed so much, because if you are having a pair of rabbits, litter boxes are a place where rabbits are known to be pretty territorial, simply because that's where they're doing all of their business, and that's also where they need to get all of their hay. So they spend a lot of time in their litter box, and it's a very territorial by nature. So when you're forcing rabbits to share, especially a covered litter box, and if one gets a little bit angry with the other and the entrance is being blocked, that's pretty much a death sentence for the other rabbit. I know we see them as our pets and we think they're adorable, but these little guys can actually do a serious amount of damage to each other. It's also important to remember that when we're keeping rabbits in pairs, it's very normal for them to have many fights. It's not normal for rabbits to be with one other rabbit their entire lives. And be granted, this is not even a rabbit that they chose voluntarily. Usually it's a rabbit that we brought home and we kind of forced them to bond. So in that situation, I just don't think it's very safe to have a covered litter box or any hides with only one entrance. Even if you have a single rabbit, hides with one entrance can actually be dangerous for you. One of the most common stories I hear is people have a rabbit in a pet shop cage, and every time they go to get the rabbit out of the cage, they're getting bit and attacked. A lot of the times, this isn't because the rabbit is territorial about the cage. This is just because the rabbit is cornered, and what do you expect a cornered animal to do except for to bite? Especially if you have hides with only one entrance, it can be really startling for the rabbit when you're approaching them. And if you startle them awake and they see a huge 100-pound human coming to grab them, it's pretty natural that they're going to try to bite or grunt at you. And a lot of the times, you're just going to be reinforcing these learned behaviors, and you can actually make your rabbit develop some serious territorial issues. Don't get me wrong, it's completely normal for rabbits to actually be territorial over hides, whether or not they have one entrance or they have multiple entrances. Rabbits can be territorial over certain toys or certain objects in their cage. I'm just saying a lot of people mistake this territorialness when it's really just a rabbit feeling cornered and having no other options because we're not reading their body language well or we startled them. So how directly does this apply to covered litter boxes? For some reason, it seems like a lot of people don't apply the same principles of a rabbit hide that they would for a covered litter box, and that's a little bit ridiculous. Whether or not your covered litter box has a flap or not, there's still only one entrance/exit. Unless you're going to manually make another one, I really wouldn't recommend using a covered litter box, especially if you have more than one rabbit. What frustrates me so much about the covered litter box argument is that there's literally no benefit for the rabbit. The only benefit is for us as humans because we get to see a prettier litter box and we don't have to see the rabbit's pee and poo. But I think that's a little bit sad. If you don't want to look at an animal's pee and poo, just don't buy the animal, get a stuffed animal. These are living beings, they have bodily functions, this is just natural for them. I think putting them in a covered litter box just so you don't have to look at their droppings is not really the kindest thing. And it might be easier for you, but it's certainly not the best option for them. A lot of you have actually told me that your rabbits seem to prefer the covered litter box over the regular litter box. One, there's confirmation bias, so if you're looking for something specific, you're likely going to see it. I actually had a covered litter box, and I didn't have anything against it. I saw London the Bunny use one, so of course the next time I went to the store, I got one, and I put it in my rabbit's cage. They had a regular litter box and a covered litter box, and I noticed that my rabbits really didn't use the covered litter box very much. In fact, I think I was cleaning it out like less than once a week because that's how little they were using it. I think given the choice between being an enclosed plastic box that's honestly pretty stinky and honestly pretty humid and just very unenriching, rabbits would much prefer an open litter box. It's easier for them to get in, and it's a lot easier for them to just access and utilize. I encourage you to decide whether you think your rabbit actually prefers the covered litter box, or maybe you're just seeing what you want to see. Also, is the covered litter box their only/best option? A lot of people only offer covered litter boxes, and they assume that just because a rabbit uses it, it means that they like it and they prefer it. And a lot of the times, they just don't have any other options, so of course they'll use a covered litter box. Also, if your only other options are like really small corner litter trays, of course a rabbit would prefer a covered litter box over that. And I think placement is also big. If your covered litter box just happens to be in a really convenient location, your rabbits might prefer to use it over an open litter box. Even if your rabbit does prefer to use a covered litter box, I think it's important to remember that as pet owners, our job is not necessarily to do everything that our animals prefer. For example, my rabbits would probably eat carrots and treats every single day if they had the chance, but I'm not going to give it to them just because that's what they prefer. It's my job as a bunny mom to figure out what's in their best interest long term. I don't think covered litter boxes are the worst thing in the world if you have a single rabbit and you're cleaning it out often. However, I just don't think that it's the most ideal, and I genuinely don't understand the purpose of doing something that's not ideal for your animal, especially considering that most covered litter boxes cost more than regular litter boxes, and your rabbit's going to enjoy it less and eat a significant less amount of hay. I just don't see why you wouldn't buy an open litter box. So, can I still use hides that only have one entrance? Well, the short answer is yes. Especially when it comes to hides, it's definitely not as big of a risk with covered litter boxes. I think the placement of your hide is really important because sometimes if you have it in a corner, it can just make your rabbits be a little bit more territorial towards it. Also, the size of the entrance is a really big thing. I notice a lot of people seem to have pretty good success using like those rabbit teepees, which have a huge entrance in the front. So even though it's technically only one entrance, it's so big that there's really not the same danger as like the entrance getting blocked off or a rabbit feeling cornered in it. I think you can use them just fine. Just make sure you're aware of the risks. For example, if you do have more than one rabbit and you notice that they're fighting more than usual, you might want to take that hide out for that time being. Also, if you notice that one rabbit is getting very territorial over it, or you're just having a bad experience with them in that hide, it just might not be worth using. I personally just don't see the purpose of buying any, any hides with only one entrance. I would rather spend my money towards something like cardboard where I can just make something that's super cheap and has multiple entrances and exits. I guess he didn't like how I set up the bunny room and he wants to redecorate. Oh my god. I'm going to be impressed if he actually gets that tunnel down because he keeps peeing and pooping in it, so I don't want it, but he really misses his tunnel, I guess. Note is that a lot of people actually recommend having as many entrances/exits as you do the number of rabbits. For example, excuse me. Wow, somebody's smart. But for example, if you have 3 rabbits, all of your hides should technically or ideally have at least 3 entrances/exits. This is what you're going to be doing to maximize safety, especially if you have a bonded pair that tends to get in a lot of spats and maybe their bond isn't super stable. I also think that if there's a hide that you really want to buy that only has one entrance/exit, you can always see if there's a way to modify it and you can add another entrance, or it can just be a toy that you're going to use for supervised play because they still can be great forms of enrichment. They're just inherently a little bit dangerous, especially for bonded rabbits, so just keep that in mind. Now, if you've watched to the end of this video and you're super convinced that your rabbit really does prefer hides with only one entrance and you have considered everything that I said, by all means, go ahead and use it. Like I said before, rabbits are all individuals and there really isn't that much research on domesticated rabbits. Even like cats and dogs, which have been kept for so many years and are very common, we still don't have enough research about like dog nutrition and cat nutrition and all these different veterinary studies. It's kind of pet keeping, even though it's very old. I feel like the scientific advancements in it are just so far behind. So I'm not saying that it's completely unreasonable that your rabbit might prefer an entrance with only one exit or entrance. Just be aware of the risks. Also, just consider whether their favorite hide is its favorite hide because it only has one entrance or exit or because of another factor. For example, you might just have a hide that's super soft or in a super good location or is this perfect size for your rabbit and that's the reason that he's using it. I'm not saying it means that you have to throw it away, but maybe the next time you're redoing his room or buying something new, you can just see if you can find something very similar that has multiple exits/entrances. Now, if I've convinced you to maybe not use your covered litter box, but you still really think that your rabbit prefers the security of it, you can easily put an open litter box inside of a hide that has at least 2 entrances/exits. Also, what I often do is put my litter boxes under tables because it offers the rabbits just a little bit more security, but it still keeps things really open and really ventilated. Also, just a quick update on the rabbits. They still aren't bonded. I'm letting Sachin use the pet room because he has better litter rabbits, and Butchin is out there, so let's go check on him. The house is kind of a mess. My mom would be really upset if I showed you guys this, but this is Butchie. They still get free roam time every single day, so it's not like he's crammed in this 24/7. And the reason that his pen is a little bit smaller is because he has terrible litter habits when the rabbits aren't bonded, and it's just easier for me to keep up with when it's in a smaller cage, and it's just a lot faster to clean out. And they are hopefully going to be rebonded soon. If they don't end up rebonding, I'll definitely have to think of some more long-term solutions, probably end up dividing the pet room in half or something like that. But I'm just trying to take it slow day by day, and I am going to work on rebonding them, but I think I would like to show less of the footage because I think I just found the whole series to be a little bit overwhelming, and I really wanted to convey everything in a positive light, and it wasn't that big of a deal because I don't want to be discouraging people from getting rabbits in pairs. But I also think this is a reality of when you're trying to bond 2 completely individual separate rabbits that didn't grow up together. It's just very normal that they're gonna have fights and spats, and I think I want to do some of it to myself. I know a lot of you expressed concern about stress bonding, and I don't think I'm going to be using that anymore. I'm still doing research on it, and I still don't think that it's a bad method to use, but I think I'm just over relying on it, and I think I'd like to try out some different techniques. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. See you next time. Bye!